So about a year ago, I finished what I called the Dream Guitar Challenge. I started with $500 and I was going to buy and sell guitars and gear to snowball into my dream guitar. So the rules of this challenge were that I could only start with $500, I could only use cash I had on hand, and each time I made any profit, 10% had to go to St. Jude's. It was really fun. St. Jude's got a good chunk of money. And then also I wound up with this, with the 2017 Gibson J-45 Standard. It's a great guitar. I really love this guitar. I think it is so well made and it is just one of my favorites. But today's the day I'm selling it. It sold last night. I actually have to rush and make this video quickly because this guitar has to be shipped out today. So before this guitar leaves, I want to run through just a few of the basic differences between a factory-made guitar and a boutique guitar. Both of these guitars have a lot in common. How are they similar? They're both Sitka spruce tops. They're both mahogany back and sides. They're both mahogany necks. They both have nickel tuners. They both have bone nut, bone saddle, plastic nut, and tusk saddle. And then this is bone nut, bone saddle. How else are they similar? They're both X-brace tops. Now, where they're different, there are a couple really specific differences. This is a 24 3/4 inch scale, so this is a shorter scale. This is 25.5, 25.4. I think it's 25.5 on the Huss and Dalton. This is a very Martin style guitar. This is a very Gibson style guitar. That's not really the point of this video. I want to be careful to tease apart the differences that make one very Gibson, one very Martin. So these guitars are made very similar, but they sound very different. Why do they sound so different? The scale length is a giant change. Oh, the other substantial difference is this is a round shoulder dreadnought and this is a square shoulder dreadnought. So why do they sound so different if they're braced the same, if they're made of the same materials? Probably, in my mind, two of the biggest differences are going to be that this is a round shoulder dreadnought and it's a shorter scale length. The shorter scale length makes J-45s magical. That's why people love them. They're springy, they have a little less tension on the strings, but overall they sound great and they play very different. They feel very specifically Gibson. I typically play a little heavier strings. Also, both of these guitars are strung with the same set of strings. They are the light top, heavy bottom, nickel bronze from Diodario. Not a sponsor, just my favorite strings. If you want to be a sponsor, that'd be awesome. Fit, finish, and construction. Those are the three main angles I want to think about these guitars through. So the fit is just generally the quality of how it is put together. So between a factory guitar and a boutique guitars operate by a different philosophy than factory guitars. Factory guitars are typically, what is the highest quality of a lot of guitars can we make? The primary goal is to make as many guitars as they can, and with that, they want those to be the highest quality possible while still meeting that total output number. That is a different philosophy than a Huss and Dalton or a boutique type builder, which they're much more concerned with just what is the absolute best guitar that we can make. And we will make as many of those as we can, but we will not compromise on the quality or integrity of the instrument itself. With this guitar, the rosewood on this guitar, on the bridge and the fingerboard, is not particularly beautiful. It's very chocolatey brown, but that's cool. It kind of adds to the vibe and the mojo. On the Gibson, there are other things, so the corners just don't feel as crispy as, you know, a boutique guitar. Especially if you look at not just Huss and Dalton, but if you look at Collings, it always feels like, because they're taking so much time and they're so meticulous, the headstock corners are going to be really crispy and sharp. Where on this, they are sharp, but the finish is a bit thicker. It just feels a little different. And it must come from some component of these guitars are made more in a factory type spec than they are by having one or a couple people that are solely responsible for the finishing of each guitar. I think one of the biggest places that I have been disappointed with this guitar is the pickguard. The pickguard is this kind of squishy, rubbery material, and it always lifts up. It's lifting up underneath the pickguard. Doesn't need to be replaced, but it's just annoying. So one of the obvious differences that does get me to a point is the plastic nut. If I was really motivated, I would have swapped that out. I like the aesthetic of the black. It feels very plain. Everything about the J-45 is just aimed at being an everyman's great guitar. On the Huss and Dalton for fit, everything feels very tight, very concise. The neck joint is exceptionally well done. The bone nut is just so perfectly cut in. It's perfectly rounded and it's polished. So this is, the bone nut itself it's gonna take an hour for somebody that really knows what they're doing to polish, fit, and just get it looking really good. So as far as fit goes, both of the guitars are really good. The only real marks against the Gibson are the pickguard and the quality of the nut. Those are my only two real issues with it. Now let's talk about finish. The finish on both of these guitars is astounding, but I will say that both have goods, both have bads. On the Gibson, this sunburst is so iconic and it is so good looking. It is perfectly symmetrical and a smooth gradient on the way in. I love that it doesn't have any red in it. It just goes from dark into a great kind of amber color. The finish on this guitar is wonderful. Now with that said, I know from my friend Tim in Baton Rouge in Louisiana, so he's a guitar builder down there and great guitar repairman. So Tim has talked about, and he fixed the Phoenix, the Hummingbird Pro that I had that had a terrible broken neck. So Tim has said that the way Gibson is doing their finishes now is, yes, they are lacquer finishes, but they're very thin. And so it makes any need for repair tricky. Because he said on that Hummingbird Pro, there were certain things with the finish. It had tape stuck to it for a couple of years, and the tape had just left some ghosting, and he wanted to fix it, but he knew that if he sanded on it pretty much at all, that the finish would come off because it's just so thin. On the flip side, the Huss and Dalton has a glassy, beautiful, high polished finish, and there's still dings and dents, and this is a played used guitar, but it still is just beautifully shiny and just a really good looking guitar. So one thing that is interesting on the finish on this guitar is that in certain lights, the pore fill or the finish, you can see it almost looks like the dog hair finishes, like from Collings or some of those. But overall, I really love this guitar. This guitar would have come out just white like a sheet of paper. It's become this really golden, mellow color. Fit, finish, construction. Construction is the third component to this conversation. So these guitars are built very differently because they are built at different speeds. Huss and Dalton only makes, 285, 300 guitars a year, which is still, that's an impressive amount of guitars for, I think there's 9 or 11. And even now during the pandemic, there's many less people working at Huss and Dalton. I think it's mostly just Mark and Jeff building guitars right now. But Gibson makes thousands of these. I don't know exact production numbers. I'll try and find it out. If I do find it out, I'll put it up here for how many acoustic guitars they're making per year. But they are making guitars at a much faster pace. And so because of that, there are certain construction methods that they're going to use that other companies don't because they don't have to, because they're not running at such a clip. This guitar is a dovetail joint neck, which is the proper, correct, wonderful, professional way to attach a guitar. It's not always the case. Huss and Dalton actually does, I think it's a modified 10-end joint. I'll get more clarity from them. I know that on the Huss and Dalton, it is not a traditional dovetail joint, But Huss and Dalton isn't a particularly traditional. They've always pushed the envelope to make guitars better, and they just have this really strong kind of engineering mind to them to make the best guitars possible. One of the construction methods is going to be how they apply the finish. I am sure that this is a very mechanized spraying, polishing, finishing, bringing up to a high gloss, where I know from firsthand experience that Huss and Dalton is pretty much a full-on custom hand-polished finish. So it's more expensive to have a person do that than to have a machine do that. Quality of materials. Boutique builders versus factory builders use different materials because Gibson needs a lot of the same kind of material so that all of their guitars are as consistent as possible, where Huss and Dalton gets to be much more particular. So on my guitar, it is very, very standard, really tight grain Sitka spruce on the top, very standard mahogany back and sides. That's wonderful. This is an everyman's guitar. And what's great is they're trying to make as many guitars that are just dead reliable, inspiring, sound good. So this guitar is not going to have fancy flamey maple. You're going to pay more for that because they're just making smaller amounts of those guitars. But on the J-45 standard, really tight Sitka spruce, really standard mahogany back and sides, really standard rosewood bridge and fingerboard. Nothing against it, but it is just because they are making hundreds and thousands of these guitars, they have to be able to get really consistent materials. So that means that the general quality or uniqueness of those materials is going to change, suffer, vary, all of those words. On the Huss and Dalton, so the Huss and Dalton, they are not tied. They're not trying to build 10,000 guitars that are identical and look the same and sound the same. They're building several hundred guitars a year, and with those, they will get the best materials they can for that price. Again, boutique buying philosophy says that you want to have the best materials so that you can build the best guitars, and you're not as concerned about making 10,000 of them. Quantity takes a backseat to quality. So with Huss and Dalton, it's a much better piece of spruce on the top. It's much more interesting and pretty mahogany on the back and sides. It's a stunning, dead black, beautiful piece of ebony on the bridge and the fingerboard. The headstock overlay, I'm not totally sure what it is. I think Kimberly told me, because she pulled up the records on this. I'll check it out. If I find it, I'll put it over here or over here. I don't know. But materials do matter a lot. The quality of materials will vary a lot. So because of the materials and all of these things being different, the prices on these two guitars are going to be astoundingly different new and about the same used, which is really interesting. So let's talk about depreciation. The Gibson J-45s, how much is the J-45 standard? So a Gibson J-45 standard in 2020 is going to cost you $2,749. That is a lot of money. This guitar just sold for $1,950, and I'm gonna cover shipping, so I'll walk away with $1,800 or so. So if you're looking at $2,749 to $1,950, that's really not a substantial change in depreciation. This guitar is what, 4 years old now? On the flip side, the MSRP, or the manufacturer's recommended sales price on this, I'll have to double check it, but it's like $4,200 or so. I bought this guitar for $2,000. So that's a substantial from $4,200 to $2,000. Now, given I got a deal on this guitar, I think that this guitar is worth $2,500, $2,750. But even then, if you come off $4,200 to $2,750, that's this percentage, once I do math in post, of depreciation, versus $2,750 to $1,950 is this percentage of depreciation. So the last question that I am going to get asked 10,000 times and people are going to be upset with me. One, this was the result of the Dream Guitar Challenge, but this isn't necessarily my dream guitar. If you followed that series, which you should, it's cool, I'm proud of it. Our life changed a lot. I took a new job. I was in a very corporate job for a couple of years, and I wasn't able to go out and find guitars. I wasn't able to get away at all. The other side is that we had a baby. So all of a sudden, like, I'm working this corporate gig and we have a baby, so I'm really not leaving home at all. So I ended up just calling it when I was at $2,100, and I bought this guitar for $1,300. And so I kept this guitar because I love it. It's really inspiring. It's a really great guitar. But with that said, there is a surprise, sneak, fun, wonderful guitar that is coming, but it's gonna take a minute. So I wanted to sell this guitar, free up some cash, offset the money that I put into the Huss and Dalton here because I want to keep the Huss and Dalton. And then there's this new guitar that's coming. So I need you to trust me that I'm not excited about the fact that I'm selling this guitar, but I'm very excited for whoever gets this guitar next. The reality is, if I ever needed to find another used J-45, I can find them because they're so prevalent and they are so good. So I hope that that answers the questions of what is the difference between a boutique guitar, what's the difference between a factory-made guitar, and answer the larger question of why I'm selling, have already sold, have to pack up as soon as this video is over, my J-45. So thanks for watching this video. I'm Jeremy, I'm the Guitar Hunter. I help you find cool old guitars and gear. I hope this video was helpful. What's the most helpful thing that you heard? Tell me in the comments below. If you want to support the channel, go to jeremytheguitarhunter.com and you can buy a t-shirt. You can also buy them in my Reverb store. All right, I'll see you guys later.